Dark Universe or Disney Villains Land? Which one of these two upcoming theme park areas will win the Battle of the Dark Parks? Hello everybody, welcome. Today we are going to cover everything about Epic Universe's Dark Universe and Disney Villains Land coming to Magic Kingdom. From the size of these parks, to the attractions, to the characters, we are going to determine which one of these two will come out on top. Universal's Epic Universe Dark Universe is scheduled to open sometime in early 2025, which means we are only a few months away from seeing this land fully realized from concept to implementation. And this is one of the most exciting lands to ever open in any theme park ever, so people cannot stop talking about this. Epic Universe and Dark Universe have people talking about how these parks may just unseat Disney as the reigning champion of the theme parks. Now, as a response to Dark Universe, Disney has now come out and said they are building the Disney Villains Land. And this is something that people have been asking for years and years. Disney has been teasing us with a Disney Villains Land for so long, but this year is finally the year where it looks like they're actually going to give it to us. Opening date is expected for Disney Villains Land to be somewhere in 2027 to 2030, so we're quite a ways away from that park opening. Considering Dark Universe is going to be opening in 2025, this means we are a full 2 to 5 years after Epic Universe opens to the public before we actually get a Disney Villains Land. And now, as I said, a lot of people are saying the only reason Disney is finally talking about really building Disney Villains Land is because of Dark Universe. That this is a direct response to Disney being very worried about Dark Universe and Epic Universe specifically. I believe that is the case. They've been talking about Disney Villains, but they've never done anything about it until now. And I believe it is because of Dark Universe. That being said, Disney is no slouch when it comes to theme parks. So we can't count them out. Even if it is a direct response to Dark Universe, it doesn't mean that Disney's not going to knock this thing out of the park. Let's not forget that Universal stole ideas from Disney. Disney was there first. Universal stole their ideas and came up with what they did, and they made things better. So Disney, turnabout is fair play. They've looked at what Universal has done, and they're now stealing ideas and stealing things from Universal. And round we go. And again, this is better for all of us. Because where one does great, it pushes the other one to do great, and then they do greater and they do greater, and that competition just keeps going back and forth, and we are the winners in that game. So in this episode, we are going to break down everything that we know about these two parks and do side-by-side comparisons and sort of look at a bunch of different dimensions to see what we can expect from these parks and figure out which one of these two lands are going to come out in this Battle of the Dark Parks. Let's talk about the dimensions that I want to evaluate these two lands on. First is going to be size. How big are these lands going to be? Then we're going to look at immersion. We'll look at the roller coasters, dark rides, restaurants, the scare factor, IPs or characters, and lastly, the excitement, or which I'll also tentatively refer to as the tilt or slant factor. At a high level, Dark Universe just looks spectacular. We know so much about Dark Universe. It's very close to opening, and there is amazing things coming to this park. It's unlike any park that's ever been made before, and I couldn't be more pumped about it. That's why people are so jazzed. I mean, this thing looks phenomenal. Some very unique things happening in this space. So overall, it is a powerhouse that most people, my order of excitement for the different lands that were coming out in Epic Universe just kept changing. Every time they announced a new area, I was like, I think that's my favorite. I think that's my favorite. I think that's my favorite. But Dark Universe at this point has got to be my number one. It's got to be my top most excited area that I'm looking forward to at Epic Universe, which I think is the case for a lot of people. Disney Villains Land, that concept art is sick. I mean, it is straight up sick. It has to be the single most epic concept art that I have ever seen when it comes to a theme park. I mean, that concept art is sick. They did not spare any expense on that. Whoever did that, whoever designed that, drew that, whatever, they need a raise. Even though it's Disney, it just looks ominous. The clouds, the colors, the darkness, it looks twisted. You've got that dark castle in the background. You've got this electric green fire-breathing dragon, spiked roller coaster tracks going serpentining through the land, and this underground caverns and waterfalls with this glow effect. I mean, it looks phenomenal. If Disney is able to pull that off even in a small way, it's going to be spectacular. So let's look at the first thing we're going to evaluate these on, and that is size. I want to talk about how big these are. So Epic Universe's Dark Universe is around 14 acres in size. If you look at the mapping, you look at how big it is, it's around 14 acres, which is a pretty good amount of space. It's around the same amount of size as what you get from Star Wars Galaxy's Edge in Hollywood Studios, so a very large portion of space, around 14 acres. Disney Villains Land, on the other hand, is also around 12 to 14 acres in size. Give or take a little bit, because we still don't know the exact dimensions because they haven't formally started construction there. But based on all the permits and the things I've done a lot of evaluations on the permits and where we're expecting this land to be. I'll link to that video below if you haven't seen it. It's got all the details on Disney Villains Land. Looks to be about 12 to 14 acres as well. So size-wise, it looks like they're gonna be equal. So I'm gonna have to give a check mark to both of them in this particular dimension. Neither one is beating the other. They're about the same in size. Next, let's talk about immersion. This is the sort of experience that you're gonna get when you're in this land. What does it look like? What does it feel like? And what is the story of the land? Because the story and the theme and how you bring all these different monsters or all these different IPs together is a factor in how immersive it is and how good it feels. It doesn't just feel like a disjointed experience where they just jammed a bunch of IPs into one space and called it a day. It needs to feel cohesive. Everything needs to be put together in a way that makes sense and there's some sort of story. When it comes to Dark Universe, they've created this story around how all the monsters come together. We're in an area called Darkmoor Village, and it centers around a character named Dr. Victoria Frankenstein. You can see Dr. Frankenstein's mansion. That's a big marquee piece of the land. But essentially, Dr. Victoria Frankenstein continuing all these monstrous experiments. But all of the monsters of the Dark Universe are coming together in this town. It takes place after all of the Dark Universe movies, like The Mummy and Wolfman and etc., Dracula movies. After all those movies and all those things have taken place, and so the town itself feels very beat up by all of that. And all these monsters have kind of come together in this one central location. So it has a nice story that they're trying to tie everything together, so it doesn't just feel like there's a Wolfman area, and there's a creature from the Black Lagoon area, and then there's a Frankenstein area, but they're all part of this like this same town or this same lore that it brings together, which I think is great. So the immersion there, it just feels amazing. It feels very cohesive to me. In addition, we know that there are going to be monsters or creatures roaming the land. So there will be I'll call them scare actors, even though they're not going to be, I don't think they're going to be trying to scare you per se. But similar to like scare actors at Halloween Horror Nights, they're going to be sort of roaming the land throughout the day and the night. We might get different creatures at night than we get during the day, sort of adding to the immersion of the town. So it doesn't just feel like there's a few team members dressed up in like normal clothes that are just kind of walking around, but it actually feels like there are characters from these movies in the space. In addition, they have a makeup experience where you can actually get painted up like a monster of some kind, and you can now become part of that land and part of that story and that lore. Again, it's just an immersive experience, sort of similar to Star Wars Galaxy's Edge, where you're getting a lightsaber or you're trying to basically be a Jedi. It makes you feel more part of the story. Or the Wizarding World of Harry Potter, where you may go to that area and you wear the sort of students' robes, if you will, and you have your wands, and there's interactive experiences to do with the wands. They do a great job of creating this immersive environment. And the same is going to be said for Dark Universe. Disney Villains area, on the other hand, we don't know a ton yet outside of a lot of the concept art, but it does look amazing. Again, and the cohesiveness we don't know just yet because there hasn't been a storyline written, but just from the art we can see things like Maleficent's castle, and again, this ominous twisted landscape with lighting effects and splash pads. But the villains for Disney are all from very different movies. They all feel very differently. You got Scar from The Lion King. You got Cruella de Vil from 101 Dalmatians. You got Maleficent. So it's going to be a challenge for them to bring all these things together under one umbrella sort of cohesive storyline. So I'm really looking forward to see how they pull that off. One of the ideas they had for an attraction, I think it was a boat attraction several years ago for villains, was basically all these villains from these different movies have sort of gotten together at this round table, so to speak, plotting how to destroy the heroes. How are they all going to get together and take down the heroes instead of being one-off villains fighting each other and fighting against the heroes, coming together, pulling the resources, and destroying all the heroes together. And essentially you walk in on them during all their plotting, and you have to run and escape, and all the villains are basically chasing you through this ride, which I thought was a really cool idea and a way to try to bring all the villains together, how it made sense from a lore perspective. So they very well could do something like that here. Some of the areas you can see are the Forbidden Mountain, again, Maleficent's castle. In the town sort of area, it's hard to see, but I've got a few ideas about what might be in those spaces based on the art. And I've had some help from some friends here on YouTube that have given me some ideas, and I want to call them out now. So it looks like we could potentially be getting in those sort of town structures and those castles, Cruella's Mansion or DeVille Manor. Shout out to Neil Patterson 5026 and Evan Laney 5806 for that tip. We could also be seeing their Cinderella's Chateau, sort of owned by the wicked stepmother, if you will, and the stepsisters. That comes from Darren Abney 608. Also kind of looks like the town from the night at Bald Mountain. And that comes from Drumaholics 7784. And lastly, Queen Grimhild's castle from Snow White. And that also comes from Evan Laney 5806. So shout out to all of our friends on YouTube who gave us those tips. Just looking at the art and what I see in that concept art and comparing that to those different locations in those films, they do look very similar. It could be any or all of those locations in Disney Villains Land, so there's a lot of possibilities. But again, seeing how they bring them all together is going to really affect the immersion. So overall, just knowing what we know about what Dark Universe is doing versus what Disney is going to do, I am going to have to say I'm giving the nod from an immersion perspective to Dark Universe. I think they're going to get a win in this column because I think the way that they're pulling it all together in that theme, to me, feels more cohesive. They've proven that they can do immersion better than Disney, quite honestly. I mean, you look at the Wizarding World of Harry Potter, both of those areas and how they connect. It's just unparalleled immersion. I'm sorry, unparalleled. Galaxy's Edge, Pandora, I think those are great. They look nice, but they don't have a ton of character to them. They don't have a ton of, almost like they lack a little bit of soul to them. It looks nice. It's a great place to visit. The attractions are great, but it just doesn't, I don't get that immersive feel like I do in the Wizarding World of Harry Potter. So for me, I think Universal has proved that they can do immersion better than Disney. And so I'm giving the nod to Dark Universe. So they're getting a win in their column for immersion. Now let's look at the battle of the coasters. Each one of these lands is going to have some sort of roller coaster, a marquee e-ticket type attraction. Starting with Dark Universe, we've got the Curse of the Werewolf, which we know is a family-friendly spinning ride, sort of similar to like a Guardians of the Galaxy Cosmic Rewind over at Epcot, except much less intense. It does actually move forward and backward. It is sort of this like sling coaster that goes forward and then backward and does have a launch in it. So it looks pretty fun. It's got a story around it, around the werewolf and the Guild of the Mystics. It also looks like it has some sort of Yeti inside of that big structure that you're gonna go through. So I'm getting like almost like Expedition Everest Yeti vibes with those big werewolves in there. And because it does spin and there is a forward and a backwards facing position, you might actually get two different experiences depending on if you start in the forward or start in the backwards facing position, which I think could be really cool. But overall, sort of a kid-friendly, less intense ride, probably at the same level of maybe like a Seven Dwarfs Mine Train. Disney Villains Land has a really cool looking roller coaster. I have to say the roller coaster looks awesome in concept. We don't know a lot of details about it. What we're expecting is it's likely to be some sort of like potentially a Gringotts type ride or maybe a Raging Spirits type ride over there in Tokyo Disney Sea. It's obviously themed after Maleficent for sure, but it also does look like it goes underground in the caverns and waterfalls, which you could be thinking of it maybe in like a Hades area or Ursula, which means the actual roller coaster could go through different time periods or different movies, I should say, different experiences or areas from the villains' movies, and it may not just be a Maleficent only roller coaster. It could be multiple different sort of evil Disney villains areas, which I think sounds really cool. It does give me more intense vibes from it, just from the art. So it feels like it's maybe potentially as intense as maybe a Guardians of the Galaxy Cosmic Rewind or the first 10 seconds of the Tron ride. And yes, I say the first 10 seconds because the other 40 seconds is not the best in Tron, in my opinion. And it's only 50 seconds long. So yeah, imagine the first 10 seconds of Tron, except maybe it's like a 2-minute version of that, or Cosmic Rewind in some way. So I feel like it's gonna maybe match the intensity of that. I think we're gonna get a bigger bang sort of roller coaster in Magic Kingdom. We really don't have like super intense roller coasters in that park. And so this could be one of the first ones along with Tron. So we'll see. But overall, it looks like it's gonna be pretty cool and more intense. So overall, if I have to do the battle of the coasters, I'm gonna give the nod to Disney Villains Land. I feel like Disney Villains roller coaster is gonna be a little bit better and more intense than what we're getting in Dark Universe. Dark Universe coaster looks cool, but it also is less intense, so it's gonna be more of a family-friendly ride. So I'm gonna go with Disney Villains on this. They're getting the nod for me as far as having the best coaster in the land. Let's move on to the best dark ride. Let's look at that dimension. Dark Universe has Monsters Unchained, the Frankenstein Experience, and we know that this is going to be an amazing attraction. It's something that's never been done before. We know that the ride vehicle technology for this is the same ride vehicle technology that they use in Forbidden Journey, which at first seems not really exciting because having that sort of like reticulating arm experience is kind of like, I'm not sure. That ride is fine, but a lot of people get sick on it and it's not like the most amazing attraction. But what they've done is they've taken it to the next level. So they've gotten rid of sort of that sort of blocker view, so that the reason they have that in the Forbidden Journey is because you're in front of screens all the time and they don't want you to see what's to the left or to the right of you or above you because it breaks that immersion. This new version isn't going to have any of that, which means everything around you 360 degrees is going to be in play. And they've already told us there's not going to be sort of these generic screens that follow your car as you're going through it. That it's going to be a complete giant area of immersiveness. There's going to be real animatronics blended with screens in the background here and there, but it is going to be an experience unlike any other, and it's also supposed to be the scariest ride that Universal has ever done before. Think of Alien Encounter way back in the day at Magic Kingdom, or even Countdown to Extinction, the dinosaur ride before Dinosaur, when it was actually scary, unlike now where it's not really that scary anymore. So something on that sort of intense, scary level they've come out and said it's going to be. So this ride said they've never done anything like it before. It's going to be the most amazing thing. I cannot wait for it. I think it's going to be a phenomenal dark ride. Disney Villains Land, on the other hand, we are going to be getting a dark ride, which looks like it's going to probably be one of two things. One is going to be a trackless dark ride going through Disney villains of some kind, similar to Mickey and Minnie's Runaway Railway or Remy's Ratatouille Adventure, or even a Rise of the Resistance type trackless ride. So it could be really cool experience, or could be similar to Shanghai's Pirates of the Caribbean ride, which if you know anything about that version of Pirates of the Caribbean, it goes forward, it goes backwards, it goes sideways. It's a really cool immersive experience. It's not just the standard log flume like what we get at Magic Kingdom or Disneyland. And again, like I said, they had a planned Villains Disney water type ride. I already talked about that. Could be something similar to that, which sounds really cool to me. But again, we don't know 100% what it's going to end up being. So for me, I'm going to give the nod for the dark ride over to Dark Universe. They're going to get the win in that category. I just don't think Disney's going to come up with anything that's going to be better than Monsters Unchained, just based on what we've seen from it. It just looks phenomenal and spectacular. Let's talk about restaurants now. Every good theme park area has to have good places to eat. Dark Universe has several different eateries. They've got the Burning Blade Tavern, which is going to have that really cool sort of windmill effect where it's catching fire periodically. It does look like it's going to be a quick service location, which sounds fun, but it's going to basically be a tavern style where monster hunters are basically gathering. We've also got Das Stakehaus, which is basically run by vampire familiars, and essentially in the catacombs underneath that particular steakhouse area is supposed to be where the vampires are hanging out, asleep in their their coffins, and the familiars of the vampires are basically taking your order, and they're the protectors of the vampires while they sleep. And so all the scenery and things on the walls is going to be vampire style, different portraits and things of vampires. Should be really cool. But again, another quick service location. So looking at Disney Villains Land, we don't know for sure what they're going to do, but I expect there to be some sort of big marquee restaurant in this land, like a Beauty and the Beast Be Our Guest style restaurant. Maybe something like a Cinderella's Royal Table type restaurant inside the castle. Maybe there will be one inside of Maleficent's castle. Just don't know for sure, but I have to say, Disney, they've really got a leg up when it comes to themed restaurants. Universal really hasn't pulled off, in my opinion, strong restaurants that are sit down. And they seem to be going down this path again of more quick service restaurants. So you've got places like the Three Broomsticks in the Wizarding World of Harry Potter. Again, it's a quick service style restaurant, and they've proven that they can do quick service pretty well at Universal. What Universal hasn't really done is sit down marquee attraction type restaurants like a Be Our Guest or Cinderella's Royal Table, or even Snow White's Storybook Dining over at Wilderness Lodge. They just sort of have a lock on those sit down, expensive restaurants. I know you may be thinking, hey, don't forget about Mythos, the sort of award-winning 5-star restaurant that they have over there at Islands of Adventure in the sort of Lost Continent area. Yes, they do have that, and don't get me wrong, the food is spectacular there. It's also not my type of food because it's too fancy for me and it's very expensive, but it's not an immersive experience. It's not something that really draws you in. Yes, you may go there and be like, gosh, the food is delicious, but it's not an experience. It's not an attraction. Disney has a lock on that. So even though we don't know for sure what Disney is going to be doing in Villains Land with regards to this sort of like sit-down restaurant, I just know there's going to be one. And I think Disney has a lock on that. So I'm giving Disney Villains Land the win in the restaurants column. I think they're going to take it by a landslide. The next dimension I want to talk about is scare factor. Scare factor for sure. We've got Dark Universe is already come to the table talking about the immersive land. They're going to have monsters and creatures sort of roaming the land. We know that Monsters Unchained, the ride, is supposed to be the scariest, coolest thing that they've ever done before. We know that Universal knows how to do scary. Halloween Horror Nights all day long. They've got scare zones. They've got haunted houses. They've got scare actors. They know how to put on a scary environment, a scary attraction. Disney, on the other hand, Disney Villains, not scary. Disney doesn't know how to do scary, and I think they don't want to do scary. I don't think they're interested in that. Again, I mentioned Alien Encounter. I loved Alien Encounter. It was scary. I was scared as an adult on that attraction. And they shuttered it. And they made it Stitch's Great Escape, which is not scary at all, right? It was cute, and then they eventually just shut that thing down. Countdown to Extinction, which was a scary ride. They shut it down, made it into Dinosaur when that movie came out. They really just took all the scariness out of it. It's a fun, herky-jerky ride, but it's not scary anymore. Mickey's Not So Scary Halloween Party, there you go. It's right in the name, not so scary. Disney, they're not scary. They're not trying to be scary. They're not trying to do scary. So when it comes to scare factor, Universal's gonna run away with this by a mile. So I'm giving the win to Dark Universe for scare factor. Let's talk now about IPs and characters. We know that people love IPs. Whatever reason, we just get attached to IPs, famous things we know. We just love that. You think about Halloween Horror Nights, everybody goes to Halloween Horror Nights for the IPs. But you know what ends up being better than the IPs? The original houses. They're almost always better than the IP houses. But for some reason, all we ever want to talk about is what are the IPs going to be at Halloween Horror Nights. And this is going to be the same for Dark Universe. It's going to be the same for Disney Villains Land. What are the IPs that are going to be in the lands? So starting out with Dark Universe, we know we've got Wolfman, the Mummy, we've got Frankenstein, Bride of Frankenstein, Dracula, Bride of Dracula, Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, Phantom of the Opera, Creature from the Black Lagoon, and probably a lot more than that. So we've got a lot of different characters, a lot of different IPs in the form of movie, all wrapped around the classic Monsters universe. Disney Villains, on the other hand, has a ton of villains and IPs. Just from their launch video alone, we saw so many different villains captured in that video. I'll throw it up on the screen, you can kind of see it as I'm talking here. But we're expecting all of these villains to show up in Disney Villains Land in some form or another. We've got the evil queen from Snow White, Chernabog from Fantasia, Lady Tremaine from Cinderella, Queen of Hearts from Alice in Wonderland, we've got Captain Hook from Peter Pan, Maleficent from Sleeping Beauty, Cruella de Vil from 101 Dalmatians, Madame Mim from Sword in the Stone, Kaa from The Jungle Book, the Horned King from The Black Cauldron, Ursula from Little Mermaid, Gaston from Beauty and the Beast, Jafar from Aladdin, Scar from The Lion King, Yzma from The Emperor's New Groove, and Dr. Facilier from The Princess and the Frog, Mother Gothel from Tangled, and King Magnifico from Wish. So there are so many marquee, just iconic villains, characters, and IPs wrapped up in Disney Villains Land. I'm gonna have to say it, I think from an IP and a character's perspective, what people are gonna be super excited about and just love to see come to life, I gotta give the nod to Disney Villains Land on this one. I think they're gonna take it. I realize that a lot of the villains that I mentioned may be more geared towards kids, and kids being excited versus Dark Universe and adults being more excited from that. So I think Dark Universe is gonna have a tilt towards adults. I think Disney Villains is gonna have a tilt towards kids. But even me as an adult, I get excited thinking about seeing characters like Scar and Gaston and Maleficent and all of the different cool characters, Dr. Facilier. I think it's gonna be really cool. So I'm giving the nod. I think that Disney Villains Land is gonna take the IPs and character slot. So if you've been keeping track of the score, it is a close race right now between Dark Universe and Disney Villains. But I want to throw in this new category here, this last category called the excitement level, or I'm gonna call it the tilt. There's a little bit of a slant here that I'm gonna put on this because of the excitement level for these parks. I am very excited for Disney Villains Land, but I'm also very excited for Dark Universe. But my level of excitement for Dark Universe, I think, is just higher for a few different reasons. One of which is it is so close to opening. We're only a few months away from it being opening. We know all of the details that Dark Universe, what it's gonna be, what attractions it has. And Disney Villains, while it seems very exciting to me, it's just not quite there yet because we don't know all the details about it. We don't know everything that's locked in just yet. And it is so far away from being a reality. Some of my excitement is sort of diminished. Excited at first when I saw it, but also like diminishing now because I'm thinking, man, it's gonna be so far away. So I think Disney Villains Land has a lot of room to grow here, a lot of ways to go, and they could definitely expand it into more things. But Dark Universe is gonna be out years before Disney Villains Land, and they're going to be expanding Dark Universe by the time Disney Villains Land even launches. So from an excitement level, a little bit of a slant for me personally, I think I got to give it to Dark Universe. So let's recap. Size-wise, they're about equal, so they're both getting a point in that column. Immersion-wise, Dark Universe takes it. Roller coaster goes to Disney Villains Land. Dark ride, we're giving that to Dark Universe as well. Restaurants is going to Disney Villains Land. Scare factor is going to be Dark Universe. IPs and characters is going over to Disney Villains. And the excitement level, the excitement dimension, lands in Dark Universe, which gives us an overall winner. When you tally everything up, the winner is going to be Dark Universe. Dark Universe, I think, is going to have the edge here. So the winner of the Battle of the Dark Parks has got to be Dark Universe. We will see if that comes to fruition. Again, I think Disney Villains Land looks super exciting, but until it's here, it's hard to say for sure. And by the time it actually lands, don't get me wrong, I think it'll be super exciting. I think it's gonna be a cool addition to the park, but they'll already be on to bigger and better things over at Dark Universe and Epic Universe in general. They'll already probably be thinking about the expansion pad there right next to Dark Universe to add something like potentially the creature from the Black Lagoon water attraction that they had planned. So there's a lot of cool things gonna be happening there. So for now, I'm giving it to Dark Universe as the winner of the Battle of the Dark Parks. That's the end of this Versus episode. It was a lot of fun bringing the Versus series back. I love doing the Versus because I like to compare things side by side and see what I think is the best. If you haven't seen any of our other Versus videos, check them out below. I'll link to a few of them. Pretty cool stuff. We'll have more coming here in the future. Hope you enjoyed this episode. Let me know what you think. Do you think Epic Universe's Dark Universe is going to win the Battle of the Dark Parks, or do you think Disney Villains has got it in the bag? Love to hear from you. Comments below. Let me know also what you think will end up in the Disney Villains land, because a lot of this is based on what I know, but also a lot of speculation. Could be some other cool things that I'm just not thinking about yet, so let me know in the comments. Thanks again for joining me. Let all your friends know about this channel. Like, subscribe, and share. Until I see you next time, the noble way is the easy way. Bye-bye, everybody.